published novelist sitting right here in front of me, which makes me feel a little bit nervous because her work is probably entirely different and was done also when you were so young that you probably just freely headed off into writing it, didn't you?
There was no house tidying involved.
No, exactly, not for you. No, exactly. So there are many ways to tell a story, but the ways that I've always done it is by massive amounts of avoidance. And so to come to a collective, which for all artists is just an amazingly unusual and wonderful experience, is brilliant because you have to just start with the starting gun. And so I really was hoping that I'd be able to persuade some people to do a little bit of writing. And I may or may not be able to, but I thought, as I'm here, I may as well think about how I would respond to it if I was one of you lot doing it. And one of the things I thought was that it would be quite interesting to choose something from the house to write about. And I walked into the house and Robert showed me where all the stuff was, and I saw these dear little people sitting here. And I don't know who they are or what they are. In fact, I started to ask Vanessa, and then I just decided I wouldn't ask her anymore. I'd just use them as my props. And the thing is that when I'm writing, all my stories are all about character and all about people. And what I do is literally, I think of, it's like Star Trek, I literally think of a kind of shape of a person. And you know how they beam them down in Star Trek and it fills up with dazzly stuff first and then gradually they appear in it. And that's exactly what happens with my writing. I think of a shape of a person in that it's not even their physical shape, it's that they are the kind of person who, I don't know, would never pay a parking fine, or the kind of person who's obsessed with the family they come from, or the kind of person who yearns for love, or just some very small one item about them. And I don't really know much else about them. And I maybe think of a name, and so I call them, I don't know, I call them Jonah. And so this could be Jonah. And I was just thinking that we could perhaps look at our people that we've got here, and obviously you've all got each other here, and we always use. I always use bits of real people, but I never use whole bits of real people. I use kind of tiny elements, like the way someone blows their nose, compared with the way someone else, parks their car, compared with the way someone else always has romance in their life and another person always has tears in their life. And so they all mix up and go into the one person, Jonah, here. And then he's got his name to deal with, which isn't perhaps the name that he might have wanted to have. So he might struggle with that. He might actually call himself something completely different. I don't know. And then I think about Jonah, and I think, well, I'm going to put him in a situation because something's got to happen to him, and I don't want to just force it on Jonah. I don't want to just make him do what to do.
Apologies.
Like, because he wouldn't do what I want to do. He would knock over a ladder when I was trying to talk. So I think about Jonah. I think, well, how can I make something happen to him that isn't just forced by me, by my sort of middle-aged female personality onto this person here. And I think, well, I'm going to put him somewhere unexpected and ask him to get out of there. So I think Jonah might go to Harvey Nichols, for example. If that's where he's going to go. He's going to go to Harvey Nichols, and he's going to have to own something from Harvey Nichols. He's going to buy something, but he's going to find he hasn't got any money, and so he's going to have to get whatever it is without any money, and get back to his group, get back to his family, get back to his office if that's where he's come from. I don't really mind where he's come from. So that's my job with Jonah, today, this evening, is I want to get him to, he's in Harvey Nichols, and that's, when I do that with Jonah, I'm starting in the middle of the story because I don't care the fact that he's never been there before. I don't care that he comes from, the Outer Hebrides, and that he hasn't actually got a car and he's had to get various buses and walk to Harvey Nichols. It doesn't, and that it's a shop that he never realised he was going to go into until he saw this little dog go in straight in front of him, for example, a little chihuahua, that he thought was so delightful. And the girl whose heels he could see just with the chihuahua looked so charming that he just followed her in on a whim. So there he is, and he has to buy something, and I think he probably decides to buy a little coat for the chihuahua because the girl's there, and if he bought the coat for the chihuahua, then the girl might like him. He's got a chance to connect with the girl. And then I think, well, God, with this guy from the Outer Hebrides, and then I have to change his background a bit because he's not going to come from the Outer Hebrides and want to buy a chihuahua coat because he just wouldn't even know such a thing existed. And so then I'd probably be stuck for a little while, and I'd sit around with Jonah. I just think, well, I've got to think about somebody else. Well, I don't quite know what's happening to him yet, so I'm going to think about her. And I wonder which one she is.
She's got the big breasts here.
Does this have big breasts? Are these big breasts? Here she is.
Next one along.
Oh, no, this one, sorry.
Yeah.
She's really quite underdressed for the fact that she's in Knightsbridge in the middle of the day. So she needs protecting because she doesn't realise that she's not wearing enough clothes, that she's wearing a really see-through top, and also her breasts are sticking out one way and her dog is sticking out behind her. So she's a very vulnerable girl. And Jonah has seen this about her, and this appeals to him in some way. So I'm now knowing a bit more about Jonah because he's quite protective. but I still don't know very much about her. She still doesn't have a name. I can't think of a name for her. So I think I'll just look in another book actually and find a name for her, because I so often do this. So she could be called Blaine. Perfect. She's called Blaine. So there's Jonah and Blaine. I promise you it's this easy. It's this easy. There's Jonah and Blaine, and there's a Chihuahua, and they're in Harvey Nichols. And actually, from my own experience, I know that when you go into Harvey Nichols with a dog, things go very badly. And from my own experience of going into Harvey Nichols with a pug and going to the underwear department with, in fact, James and a pug, and we were in there when the pug was very small, and admiring the La Perla, and then a man came up and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That dog's not allowed to be here." And I didn't think they'd notice him because he was in my bag, as dogs should be in Harvey Nichols. And I thought that was the right of dog to be in Harvey Nichols in a bag. So I felt completely confident until this moment. And then this man who didn't even look like a proper security guard, he wasn't wearing a badge or anything, he actually looked like he could be a shoplifter in Harvey Nichols. He was in there saying we had to leave with the pug. And we said, okay, we will leave with the pug, actually thinking we'll go and buy some nice things on the way out. And he escorted us, do you remember that? He escorted us out of Harvey Nichols. So I now know that this can happen to Blaine. She's going to be in the underwear department where she's gone to buy, I think she's probably actually gone to buy something quite supportive, not for her though, for her mother, because she doesn't wear anything supportive ever. Her mother really wants something supportive, so she's gone in there to buy her mother a present, some Spanx, and so she's in there in the Spanx department. So obviously it's now becoming a comedy, this story, without us meaning it to. We thought it was really sad when it was about Jonah, and he was quite depressed and probably quite inward looking, but now it's becoming a comedy about Blaine and the Spanx. The Chihuahua, whose name we don't have yet, but we will find the Chihuahua's name. Does anyone have a name for the Chihuahua?
Noodle.
Noodle, exactly, Noodle. So he's pretty frivolous too, isn't he? So he's there, and so they've gone up to the underwear department. And don't forget that Jonah's mission is to buy something and then find he hasn't got any money. So poor Jonah is just heading for a real bit of embarrassment, I think, because I now think actually the person who hasn't got any money is Blaine, who he's following, and he just, he's really becoming more entranced by her, and he's never been in a shop like this. So if we were writing it, we would really enjoy writing it from Jonah's point of view, because instead of noticing what I would notice in Harvey Nichols or what any of you would notice, you try and notice what Jonah would notice, which if he comes from, let's not have him out of Hebrides, if he comes from, I don't know, somewhere where would he come from?
Wiltshire.
Wiltshire, okay. And they don't have shops like that there. They don't have ridiculous shops. He would be amazed. He'd be absolutely astonished when he stopped by a dress and saw it cost £2,500. He would probably think it cost £25 or maybe £250, and he would almost fall over when he saw how much it actually cost. And he would be very intimidated by those women who all have blank faces of Botox in Harvey Nichols, and they all have these expressions when they're outside Harvey Nichols. We remember they're all normal people walking and talking and chatting, and then they go through the doors and so terrible change comes upon them, and everyone goes into this glazed mode as they head through Harvey Nichols with these very frightening faces on, all about to spend zillions of pounds, or pretend they're going to if they're not going to. Blaine isn't really like that, and she wouldn't be in there if it wasn't for the fact that her mother needs these pants really badly. I think maybe her mother's a yoga teacher, and that's why she needs them. that would be good. She's perhaps going to do a yoga. She's going to do a kind of yoga show. There is a yoga show at some time in the autumn, so the mother can do that. She can be doing that, and Blaine has thought her mother really is no longer quite the right shape for her yoga show, and she's going to be on a big stage in Olympia in front of lots of people. So she's really thoughtfully buying these pants for her mother, and so she's in there. And Blaine, not being a practical girl, has not. She's brought her Oyster card, but she's totally forgotten that her Oyster card wasn't in where it normally is. It wasn't in her wallet, so she hasn't got a wallet. So she gets there, gets the paying place with the dog under her arm, and doesn't realise that the security man is, heading up from one side. Also doesn't realise that Jonah, who's actually her guardian angel, is on the other side, looking at her. She's just thinking about these pants, and so she starts to try and pay for them, and she has that awful moment that I'm sure everybody's had at some point in their lives of finding they haven't got the money for something, and they're in a place where it's built to intimidate anyway, and the whole point of it really is to intimidate you and make you feel that you need to join the gang. So Blaine is searching around her pockets, searching around everywhere, and as we know, she's not wearing much, and so it doesn't take her long to realise that she hasn't got anything at all. So Jonah's then able to step in, and I don't think he'd have a credit card actually with him. I think he'd pay with cash probably. I don't know how much Spanx are, but that would be my research for this piece of writing. I'd find out how much Spanx were. That would be about an hour on the internet. Just making sure. So Jonah would have, I reckon they're probably about £26. Does anyone know how much Spanx are? No? Or if they do, they're not. Anyway, let's say they're £26. So Jonah comes up to Blaine and hands over the money. This, of course, is brilliant in many ways, but it's also really embarrassing for Blaine because she doesn't know him and she's quite ethereal. I think she's quite like, has anyone read Cold Comfort Farm? Well, there's a girl called Delphine, is she called Delphine in that? Who flits about the place. She's so ethereal she hardly exists, and she's always on a mountain, on a moorland somewhere, and someone's always in love with her, but they never even get to see her. And Blaine's a bit like that, I think. She's kind of got lots of quite knotted, long, lovely, greeny blonde hair. She could not be real, actually. If you wanted to make your book slide into a parallel universe, you could make Blaine be a mermaid. But she's, for the current purposes, she's human but ethereal, and so she's quite shocked that, as I suppose all of us would be shocked, but most of us would be just bloody relieved that someone would pay for these pants for her, because she doesn't know how to deal with Jonah, who's quite a fierce-looking man, actually. You know, he's got a very big red paw, and he's got very angry eyes. And so while she really wants to accept this money from him and this you know, this incredible gift that will mean her mum has the pants, everything will go well, and that the dog won't get sent out now, because at the same time we will have a secondary conversation with this extremely tall and very strong and big burly man saying, you can't have a dog in here, that dog has to leave this shop right now. And she doesn't know how to read that because she's not had this experience before of her dog not being allowed in. And little Noodle is probably going to really let the side down by peeing or something now, or trying to shag the leg of a dinosaur. They just will not behave when you want them to, and they will not, you can't say, actually it's not real, it's a toy dog, and push it into your pocket is what you want to do. And so Blaine has to deal with this moment, and when I'm writing, I find it really odd because I can set up to this point, and then I just don't know what's going to happen. And you read all the time in interviews with writers that they say the characters take on their own lives, and that's exactly what they do. Because if you've written this much of these people's story, which by the way would take a lot longer than the 10 minutes it's taken to make it up, by that point you're really quite involved with them, and literally Blaine's decision of how she deals with that is her decision. It's the character that you've made, the character that is the daughter of this woman who does yoga and doesn't realise that most of her is now falling out of the clothes that she was wearing for yoga years ago and needs to be pushed back in. That she's the kind of girl who takes her dog everywhere with her, that she has never been, not spent a lot of time in Harvey Nichols or similar shops. She's so unaware of herself, she doesn't realise she's virtually naked. And yet, here she is having to have a conversation with quite an intimidating looking man who actually is really kind, but she doesn't know that yet. We know that because we followed him in there as well. And actually we know that because the only mission of the story was to have somebody get something from Harvey Nichols without any money. And so we know he's not got a horrible agenda, he's not got anything bad about him, he's a nice guy, but he's so different from her that we at this very moment don't know exactly what they're going to say to each other, and that's where the magic comes. You then have that happen, and these are called collisions. Well, I mean, it's not what they're only called, but in some creative writing courses I've taught, we just call them collisions just for the sake of getting something to happen, because so many people write their stories and they're usually about their lives, and they usually have people, in my case, endlessly leaning against the Arga, endless animals appearing, children, all lovely, and actually nothing ever happens. And I taught this creative writing course with another writer called Ed Docks, and we were a really hilarious double act actually, because I was always getting them to write lovely things, saying, "It doesn't matter as long as it flows," and then he'd say to them, "Yes, it does matter. Someone's got to die or a car crash has to happen, or some drama has to happen every sort of 37.5 pages." So they'd start crying when they see him, and then they come back to see me and I say, no, nothing has to happen. But actually, both of us were right. Something has to happen, and a collision has to happen of some sort, but it doesn't have to be as bad as Ed wanted them to make it be. But it can just be this collision of these two personalities meeting each other, and then what? And then what? And when you get to that point with your characters, whichever any of you were going to be writing through the night would be tomorrow morning, you then decide kind of what you're going to do with them next. What are you going to do? Are they meant for each other? I don't know. They're on the wrong side if they are. They ought to be that way around. Or is someone else coming in? That is Blaine and Jonah. But maybe someone else is coming in. What about him? He's so compelling. Yeah. Who's he?
They're tantric sex guru.
Is he their tantric sex guru? I think this is the mum's boyfriend. Yeah. And that's why the mum went really into yoga, because this was her boyfriend, absolutely. So no wonder. What's his name? He's a very unappealing character, but the mum adores him. And I think he wears these trousers that I think he's quite a Buddhist, and he doesn't actually like to have anything constricting or restrictive. He doesn't believe in any boundaries. So he doesn't even wear clothes that have any kind of fastenings in, no belt, no nothing. He kind of has a sort of tunic thing that pins here, and then he has a very soft kind of pair of nylon-y trousers that they kind of gather. They don't really do up tightly. And he's really creepy. And I don't think he lives with them, because I think she lives with her mum. I think he lives elsewhere, but the mum is, as you say, strangely tantrically linked with him and can't escape him. And so he is who Blaine is going to see when she leaves this encounter in Harvey Nichols. And we still don't know why that matters. We don't know how important he is. He might be really small, he might be a really small character way over here. But her mum is now starting to assume quite a large position in the story. We don't really have anyone to be her mum though, so that's just, I don't see that as a yoga teacher. Look, we have one here. Oh, there she is! There she is! Absolutely, there she is. Now, what's weird about her is she looks like the really scary ghost in I'll Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, which goes along, I don't know if any of you have read that ghost story, and it goes along the beach, kind of waving its arms, and I always thought of it as looking like one of those corkscrews. So now, to me, the mum has assumed an actually really terrifying persona, quite ghostly, because look at her boyfriend, and she's a ghost, so she's a really gothic woman.
Is there an element of secret alcoholic?
There's almost bound to be, not even very secret. I think the mum's constantly going like this, actually. And that's the motion that Blaine has found so terrifying. And she's a corkscrew. So she's definitely an alcoholic. Which means maybe he's not so bad, because maybe he's got her slightly under control. And maybe he's, in his tantric way, he's actually stopping the mum drinking too much. So maybe Blaine's, complicatedly, while hating him, finding him quite useful. So maybe it's such a bloody relief to be in Harvey Nichols that she thinks, I'm going to do some shoplifting. I'm so pleased that I'm not at home with my ghastly family. So when Jonah arrives, Blaine might well at this point feel really disappointed, because she was just about to embark on an adventure entirely of her own. Exactly. And Jonah has come along, and he's kind of very sensibly holding up the stop sign and saying, here's the £26 for the Spanx, we can pay and leave.
He's definitely got a Scottish accent.
He has.
If he's the steady one.
Do you think he doesn't come from Wiltshire?
I forgot about the Wiltshire accent. Maybe the come from Wiltshire
from Scotland.
He might have been an orphan.
I forgot the Wiltshire accent.
It doesn't have to come into the story, but we have to know it, exactly. So we have to think about it.
We had a Scottish nanny.
Maybe he had a Scottish nanny. Which means he
He's quite classy. He's from farming stock.
He could be from farming stock in Wiltshire, exactly, and he could be the youngest. Or
I don't think he is.
You don't think he is? Where do you think he comes from? Do you think he's from?
He's from Wiltshire, but I don't think he's from Barnstock.
I don't think he had a nanny.
Okay.
Maybe he used to be Maybe he's got
Or maybe he's an actor. And he can do accents, yeah. Or maybe he just picks up accents very well.
Yeah.
And maybe he doesn't even know he's going to be an actor actually. How old is he? What?
I think he's potentially an actor.
Yeah.
He's a bit shy for being an actor.
He's a bit shy, exactly. And maybe he thinks he'll be more attractive to Blaine if he's got a Scottish accent, because maybe he just saw Trainspotting last night and thought it was quite a cool film. Because he had found himself in a cool, edgy area and went to a cool cinema in Brixton, and so saw Trainspotting and thought, right, I'm going to be Scottish tomorrow. And there's Blaine, and he's got his £26, so he's paying. She's a bit annoyed about that, and although she's not naturally a person who gets angry, but a bit of spirit and spark comes into her because she actually did want to go on a little bit of a spree at this moment. She didn't even know that she did, but that's what she wanted to do. And so their encounter now is starting to have more validity, and even if we haven't even mentioned them necessarily in the book yet, but in the story yet. But because we know that gives us the chance to see that Blaine is more important than just buying these plants for her mum. and is or not buying them, stealing them. And we're still wondering, we're still not sure about the dog. We're still in Harvey Nichols. We actually want to get out, and we're starting to feel very, very exhausted by this chapter of our story. So the great thing is that you just stop there. You don't have to do any more of that bit. You can just leave them there. You can, as long as they've collided, as long as they've had something happen to them, it doesn't matter at all how much of it you do at this stage. You just do it. So that they speak. He says, do you want this 26? Let me buy these for you. Let me pay for these for you. Actually, probably her first thought before even being irritated is that he thinks she wants them for her, which is an appalling thought. So that's embarrassing. And she might explain that. She might say they're not for me, and that might be the end of that chapter completely. And that might be the end of that story. Actually, it might not go any further than that. But we might find that we want to go back to them. We might find that we're actually really interested in Blaine, and we're really interested in Jonah and Jonah's past. And what I've found in things that I've written recently is that I do that much, and then I think, well, why on earth have I got them, and why have I got those people there who I don't even like, and I don't want to have anything to do with them, and who are they all? And I sit around with it for a while, and then I think, well, let me find out some more about Wiltshire and where he comes from, because I'm just not moving anywhere with the rest of it at the moment. So I go off and look up that, and I find out perhaps about the Downs and the Valley of the White Horse, and I might find some sort of folkloric history. And actually, I don't know anything about that area, so I can't even pretend that I find anything out about it. So I might suddenly start to find some adventure that takes me off there. And actually, I'm suddenly thinking about Laurie Lee and I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning, which is such a fantastic book about a country lad in Wiltshire. And so then I can start to think about him as the person he is before this piece of story, and then I think of the complexity for him of becoming a cool dude who goes to train spotting at a retro cinema or whatever, and is kind enough to help a girl, and he starts to become more and more real for me. So the Star Trek man, who was just a sort of dazzle of little tiny specks, is suddenly beginning to have features. I might at that point turn him over and paint him differently so he doesn't look like that. And I've so often done that. I've so often started with someone looking, usually I make them look really disgusting actually, because I just never want to write a Mills and Boon kind of book, and it's always such a worry if you're a girl writing a book, and especially if you're prone to putting argas and things in it, that it will end up being just that kind of thing. So I make them really hideous, and then I often have to cross it out and make them more attractive. Partly because I don't even want to go on their adventure otherwise, especially don't want to go on his adventure or hers actually. Yeah, that person isn't in it yet. But these people are going to come into it, and they might be Jonah's family. This might be Jonah's brother actually. I think this is Jonah's brother, and I think he's really into motorbikes. And I think he actually might have built a motorbike in his front room, which is in Cheltenham, I think. Definitely, yeah. And he's built it in his front room inside his house, and his girlfriend really hates it being there because it's obviously in the way of everything they do. And the more he builds it, the more unlikely it is ever to leave, because it's getting bigger and bigger. It's probably one of those great big chopper ones that won't fit out of the door. And he is Jonah's brother, and I don't know what significance he has yet. And so. But what I find is then I get interested in the sort of, the people who build chopper motorbikes, and I'm also interested in the folklore of Wiltshire. And then I suddenly find, and I don't know if that would ever be the case with that, but it's certainly the case with some research I've been doing recently, that there's lots of history of, bikers in Cheltenham going on, rides around England, or on folklore that has people, walking for miles, walking to London, or walking, around the country telling stories, or whatever it might be. There's a fantastic bit in the programme of the play Jerusalem where the writer explains what drove him to write the play, and it's all lots of explosions of thought of, he heard a story about a girl who left her lesson and decided to hitchhike to Scotland and was never seen again until about 3 years later, or a boy who he bumped into in the street who was so light he felt like a bantam, and then he bumped into him a few months later and he was heavy and solid, or a giant that walked from Avebury over the hills. And he added all these stories in together, and there were about 10 others, to make the sort of magic that was the play. And that's kind of what I find ends up happening, thank God, is that you don't know, but you have to keep going past the bit where you think, actually I don't like them and I really don't like them, so something's gone wrong here. You have to have faith past the beginning bit to go with your people and to find things that you actually really like about them. And those two people, I think, are rather interesting. I'd quite like to get them out of Harvey Nichols, and I'd like to know what happened to the next one. I'd like to know if they went together anywhere. I don't know yet because I haven't written it yet, but I could make them go somewhere. And if I impose what I would do on them, it will soon die. They will just be, left probably somewhere near Sloane Square Tube Station. Yeah, very near enough. Maybe in the Arga shop, looking sort of a bit bored and with nothing to say to each other. But if I let them, with their history, that his family here, who's this? We've got this person is his brother. Oh, and this might be someone. This might be one of the white horses actually. What are they called? Do they have names? All of them? All the white horses of the.
The white horse.
Yeah,
Oh no, but there's loads of them. Do any of them have a name?
I think it's just for each place.
Just each place has one. Okay,
The white
so
horse.
what's the
or
place that's got
giant
one?
Dorset has got.
Have you got? Has your place got one?
There's a white horse.
What's the hill one behind Morgan?
Yeah, just Granham Hill, the Granham White Horse.
The Granham White Horse. So that might be the Granham White Horse, and so you just would keep wondering what significance that had, and you'd find that it had some significance for the family that suddenly made the family more real. So that's how I find it works. And I was going to try and make you all do that, but then I heard that none of you wanted to do it, so I had to do it myself. So I wasn't planning to give a talk, I was planning to make you all work. And what I wondered was if literally I gave you all a pen and a piece of paper, if all of you could write one line about these people, and then just one line, just one sentence about these people, and they'd give them back to me, and I could look at it, or I could post it perhaps on a thing on Facebook, and I could see if I could come back to it, or anyone else could come back to it through the 2 weeks and see what happened to them.
Or just write it.
We should just do it now. Just whack it out.
But if everyone could write one sentence, because then it would be fair, because I had to do all the talking and I didn't think I was going to have to.
What about writing out and then doing it?
You could definitely do it. We can do it like consequences.
The next person, and so
Yeah, let's do consequences.
We could definitely do it like consequences, yeah.
Does anyone else have a bit of writing?
Yeah.
One sentence.
Yeah.
It won't hurt. And it doesn't have to be spelt right.
If you want to get involved with writing, come, and if not, then you can do a sentence.
Yeah.
you pass it on, so one person will continue.
We can do